Okay? The Gemara says that Lo'elam yilmid odom b'mokim shelibo chofetz. A person should learn in the place, meaning in those inyonim, those things that he has some kind of a personal affinity, he can relate to it. Libo chofetz, he has a desire for it. So that libo chofetz is part of the success of learning. This is why the inyonim, I'm skipping these few pages, not because there isn't a lot to learn. On the contrary, it's a very deep inyonim, but both it's difficult. On the other hand, it'll be even more difficult for us here to relate to it. It's much more removed inyonim. So I'm afraid we're going to lose Shalom interest. So therefore, I skip to the sois. Okay, ois ches. And if there's anything that is necessary for what we skipped, necessary to understand the following, I'll fill it in. Vehine, ta'am adovar, the reason, the alidei avedas anisyonis, the reason for the fact that as a result and through the avodah, through the labor and the effort in nisyonis, we already explained right in the beginning of this mimer, that it means that a person is put to a challenge, to a test. He has a difficulty. Nisoyon basically means that he has an obstacle in his path. And as a result of it, Magiyim, one can reach Libechinas Hahakora Belakus. He can reach to that which is called Hakora, recognition, cognizance in Elokus. And I'll come back to this in a moment. Kilo Roya Beriyo Muchoshes. As if, just as it would be like he sees something Beriyo Muchoshes, with sight of Muchosh. Muchosh means sense, a sensual. In other words, he actually experiences it. He explained in the few paragraphs that I skipped that das, because it says in the pasuk Menasse Hashem Elokeichem Esam Lo das, and he said that this in order to get das. Das, he explained, is this inyan what's called the Re'iyo Muchoshis, a factual sighting, a factual seeing. Now, how is it possible to see Elokus? Elokus is not visible.
Didn't we mention in the last verses that we learned in the reminder that the neshama has the same, so to speak, senses in Shemayim that he has down here, but on a spiritual sense?
Yeah.
Is it the same type of vision that it experiences in Shemayim, or a physical vision?
The truth is that which we can reach here through Avodah and Yishenis elevates even the neshama itself. That's what we learned. It brings an aliyah in the neshama. This is what's going to be explained here, that the power of a nisoy, the power of an obstacle. But I want to explain in general what is meant when we say that you have a re'iyo hakora belokus, recognition in elokus kilo rei, as if he sees. But the elokus is not visible. It says in the pasuk in the Torah, lo yerani ha'odom v'choy. But Moshe Rabbeinu on the Har Sinai, Est Hashem, Hareini Noas Kvedecha, show me your glory, show me yourself. And the Rebbe said it's impossible. Lo Yirani Hodam V'choy. They can't. If you see me, it's not possible to see and remain alive. So what is it, David? But we reach Hakora Belakus Kilu.
Is it speaking figuratively?
It's speaking figuratively in the sense that it's not physical sight. True. But nevertheless, there is.
So maybe what you mean over here to see him is not about to see in like a person or some other stuff. It's maybe about to see him. It's maybe like Moshe, you say in the mountain. Maybe he hear him. It's like to see him. He come to you. He around you. This is to see him.
Yeah. Okay. Let me explain. Clearly, it doesn't mean physical sight. There's no physicality. That's it. But the effect of this is as powerful and even more powerful than Riyu Mechoshis, than physical sight. And this is the Indian that I want to discuss a little bit. First, I go back to the beginning of this. It says, Bechinas Hakora. Hakora means recognition. Recognizing. Now, the word recognition applies to something that you have known before. You can't recognize a person that whom you've never seen. Which implies right away that this Inyan of knowing Elokus at close proximity, knowing Elokus clearly, is not something new to the neshama. It is something that the neshama readily knows, so to speak, and relates to. Except that just like in the case, a person that you haven't seen in a long time, you've seen it sometimes, and then time passed and you didn't see him. When time passes, you didn't see him, then you forget about him. You can't even picture his face anymore. You forgot about him. And then, when something brings the memory back, brings his face back to you, you say, oh, I recognize him. I remember 30 years ago I saw you. The union of Elokus, to know Elokus in the neshama beguf, in other words, the way the neshama is in the body. And as we discussed before, that when the neshama is in the body, the neshama, you can know only such things that the guf can also relate to. You cannot know something that is devoid means that's absent, does not have any kind of physical presence, because that's what the guf is. The guf can only relate to something that has a physical presence, and that's why when the neshama is in the guf, all the inherent knowledge that the neshama has on its own is in a distance, is lost. There's no way to relate to it because you're in a different world. But that knowledge still remains inherent in the neshama. How do you relate? How do you touch that knowledge? You cannot touch that knowledge by learning and by understanding and by proofs, because all that is all within the realm of the guf, all in the physical realm, and that's not the knowledge of Elokus as the neshama knows. In order to touch that, you have to have some kind of a means to reach up to the neshama itself, not through the process, through the process that goes through the guf, that the guf should participate, should be part of it. In other words, the seichel, the normal seichel should be part of it. Anything that the guf participates is not going to be that kind of knowledge of Elokus. You can have proofs, definite proofs. I believe it and all that, but it's not that direct knowledge, kilo roya. Now I want to discuss the union from Re'iyah. The union of Re'iyah, of sight, the power of sight, is that you recognize the reality of the thing that you see. What does it mean, recognize the reality of the thing that you see? If we would analyze the situation, the human situation, there's a human being, and there is everything around him. The people, the whole world around him. And looking at it from this perspective, it would mean that a person knowing himself, he knows firsthand. That's the reality. Because he experiences and he senses and he feels himself. Everything else, he knows only as a secondary thing. Everything else he knows, not because he knows that thing, because that thing is distant from him, separate from him. He knows how it appears to him, how it affects him. This is how knowledge would be defined. I know it because it makes sense according to my seichel. It makes sense to me. I can figure out what it is. But not that I know this thing firsthand. Because it's not firsthand, it's secondhand. This is true in every mode of knowledge. Except sight. Sight has that special purity in it. That you know the thing, not just the way it affects you, but the way the thing is unto itself. It's as if you were that thing. This is why sight means that you know the reality of it. Sight is more convincing. It's amazing, right? Sight is more convincing and more clear to the person than touch. Touch is undeniable, right? I touch it, I feel it. Sight is infinitely more convincing, more real. Why? Because what is the method of knowledge that comes to touch? I have proof that this thing exists because I'm experiencing it. I'm touching it, I feel it. In other words, it is through experience. It is not that I know the thing itself. The thing tells me I'm here. No, the thing doesn't tell me. It affects me. I can't walk through this table. I know there's a table there. So this is secondary knowledge. Sight, on the other hand, I know not because it affects me. I can close my eyes. I can open my eyes. Nothing forces me to see it. If I see it, it's because I see it. It's there. not because I'm forced to acknowledge it. Like hearing even. Hearing is close to sight, right? It's also a spiritual experience. But hearing, there's something banging in my ear. Not so in sight. And it's an interesting thing that sight is unique among all the senses because of this refinement of sight. It's unique among all the senses is in the fact that sight you can naturally, without any effort, close off. You can close your eyes and you don't have it. That itself is to prove, to give you this sense that what you see is reality. Nothing is forcing itself on you. Whereas every other sense, touch, you can't close off touch. You cannot touch something and not feel that you're touching it, unless you're losing some nerves. And a healthy person is not possible. Smell, taste, hearing, it's not possible to close off. Sight, you can close off. Which means that in sight we have this unique gift of seeing the reality of the thing itself. And this is why, in fact, sight is what brings the world to us as a reality. This is why the world is so real to us. If it were only through hearing, through touch, it wouldn't mean anything to us. It would mean only what I can get out of it. The fact that we feel that we are part of the world and participating in the world is because of sight. Because that gives us a real sense of reality. So there is a lot more to speak on this, but let's suffice with this at this point to understand when we say that you can get to Hakora be'elokus, cognizance in elokus, not finding out, not knowledge, not proof, but a personal direct cognizance as if you see it. In other words, you see the reality of elokus itself not as a secondary knowledge, not through some other means, like I have proof for it, but I know it directly. Just like I see something is a direct knowledge, I have knowledge in the Elokus also as a direct knowledge. That's why it's called the Re'iyah. Even though it's not Re'iyah, it's not sight, there's no physical sight. But any knowledge that has this quality, that it is absolute, it's direct, it's seeing the reality of it, not just seeing how it affects me or proves, this is in the category of Re'iyah. It's called Re'iyah. Because that, in fact, is the experience of Re'iyah. That's what Re'iyah is. Okay, we have. Yeah, the halacha is that a summa, on somebody who is sightless, is spotted from all the mitzvahs. And somebody who is sightless says, why is he put from all the mitzvahs? Because he doesn't have a Yetzer Hara. He doesn't have a Yetzer Hara. So what he doesn't have a Yetzer Hara, he doesn't taste food. He doesn't feel a touch. He has everything. He doesn't have a Yetzer Hara. Because everything that he experiences, it loses its reality. It's not real. It's just the personal experience. Yetzer Hara is that which confuses a person and says to him, there's another reality. Seek that reality. Not the godly reality, seek the worldly reality. But the world is not real. Without sight, it's not real. And therefore there's no Yetzer Hara. Okay, and now so the Rebbe is going to explain, based on the pasuk, that we skip some of the things, but the principle that Avedas and Nisyoina is the Aveda that a person goes through and comes to as a result of Nisyoinos, that he breaks through obstacles in Avedas Hashem, that brings a person to a state of Hakora Balakus, Kilu Roya Birumuchushis. Like he has a sight, which means Elokus then to him does not become a secondary knowledge, but a primary knowledge. It's the reality itself. How can that be? So he says the reason that this happens, who it is, Lefi, is because that it is not similar, the Aveda, the method in the Aveda that comes in a Nisoyin, as compared to the Avodah with other physical objects, other physical things, hamizbarerim, that get to be mizbared, that get to be purified, clarified, and the good is drawn from amidst a mixture of good and bad. That's birur. Birur means you take the good out of the bad. Like you crack a nut and you take the fruit out and throw out the shell. And this is basically the union from Tvorim HaMizbarim, to be Mizbarer Gashmius. Every Gashmizik thing has a good thing, has a godly spark in it, a godly quality to it. And it also has that which is Gashmius, which draws you to a different world. And the Aveda of a person is to be Mevarer, to take the good and throw out the klip. So that's also an engaging Aveda. And it also reveals godliness, but not in similar way as Nisayin. And the Rebbe says that the method of the Aveda, of Birurim, is different than the method of the Aveda of Nisayin. It's a different approach and different way to accomplish it. The difference is hein be'etzem hadvorim. It says both in the things themselves. We'll come to this. Ve'hein behanitzutzeis de toihu shebohem. And also the nitzutzes de toihu, the godly spark that came down from the world of toihu that is contained in these two, whether it is in the Gashmius or it is in the Nisoy. Let us discuss a little bit. We already touched upon it, but briefly. And in the middle, there's something that we skipped. Nitzutzes de toihu. I want to discuss this with you. You'll come across this many times in Chassidus. First, let's define the word toihu. Toihu means wild, essentially. Wild, without purpose, without order. This is generally what the word toihu means. So, We'll identify it the way it is, it shows itself in the world, and then understand what this refers to in Tzutzis de Toyu. The world, our physical world, as it says, actually is a world that reflects the world of Toyu, except it reflects the world of Toyu at the level where at a very low level, which we'll discuss. What is the Toyu aspect of our world? Now let's understand. Hashem creates the world. Anything that's being created, like if you, a human being, does something, you're writing. So if you write, you're going to write an orderly thing, and you can read it back and know what you wrote. If you're going to write gibberish, and the letters are going to be misorganized, you won't be able to read it back, that's not writing. And no person does such a thing. If a person does something, he does something organized, and you can readily see what it is that he is doing, and what purpose there is in doing it. That should be simple and obvious. Now we come to our world, and we say, God created this world. And what did he create? What's in the world? There are mountains and valleys. There are wild beasts. There are oceans and rivers, and there's deserts, and all kinds of situations that seemingly are meaningless. It's just a presence without any particular design, a particular purpose. Even coming back closer to home, which is something which we discussed many times. When you have a fruit tree, an apple tree, so the apple tree is good food for the human being. But does the apple tree actually have in mind, so to speak, to feed the human being? The apple tree is just doing its own thing. It's completely disinterested in what's going on around it. It happens to be that a human being can go and, it tastes good, I can eat it. But as far as the tree itself, it couldn't care less what happens to it. In other words, it's toyu. It's a wilderness. Things are happening, but they are to no end. End means no purpose and no intent. The human being, Hashem created the human being to put order in the world and to bring out and reveal the meaning and purpose of everything that was created. As you know, it was Adam Rishon who was called in by Hashem to name everything that was created. Why Adam Rishon? Because Adam Rishon was the one who can assign a function to everything in the world. In other words, he can put things in order. But on its own, it's a wild world. A wild meaning purposeless, going nowhere. Okay? Now, let's think of it from a different angle. take, let's think of it from a different angle. Huh? If you learn by day, you'll sleep at night. You take the lowest, so to speak, the lowest element in the world, a rock. A rock, find a rock in the middle of nowhere, and it seems to be saying nothing. Doesn't care what happens to it. On the other hand, a rock is an element of being, it's an existence that in the context of the world, it's like an infinite, it's indestructible. Right? Anything, if you take the watch can break, which means it's no longer a watch. No longer serves what it's meant to be, because it has a certain function. And if it breaks, it loses its function, it loses its value. A rock can never lose its value, because whatever happens to it, it always remains a rock. In other words, it kind of represents a basic presence that is indestructible. So if we were to project and say, okay, in Ruchnius, taking in on a spiritual level, what is indestructible? What is indestructible? What cannot not be? The only thing that's indestructible is godliness. Which means that a rock really represents a very profound aspect of godliness. Huh? Oh, a rock, a stone, man. Hmm? Do again? Yes, 7 languages. So that true that by the time it gets down here and becomes a rock, it completely doesn't tell you anything about godliness. It's just a presence without any meaning, without any spirituality to it. But in its root, it actually represents something of enormous greatness. The real, the deepest inyonim of Elokus, of godliness. Except in between, from its source, from what it represents, until it got the rock, this is what's called Shviras HaKelim. There was a breakdown. That's called Shviras HaKelim. That in Torah there was Shviras HaKelim, there was a break, and everything, and it fell down to a very low level. But within these elements, that is on such a low level, therein lie the godly sparks where they came from. And when a Yid takes these and is mevarer, he draws out and he shows how the rock actually comes from godliness and it's meant to be used for a godly purpose. He elevates and he reveals the godly spark where that it came from. That's the general gist of the moment here. And this is what Rebbe says. All birurim means to clarify and to identify good from bad. All of that is basically involved in clarifying and clearing off nitzutzi de tohu, the sparks that came from the world of tohu, from the highest world called tohu, where there is godliness in a tremendous intensity, tremendous power, but from there it fell down to the physical world, and the physical world resulted from this fall. And now, through our avodah, we are mevarem, which means we draw out and we show how this physical world actually contains these highest of sparks, and how the physical world can actually be instrumental in revealing godliness. Just to give you an illustration in general perspective, we know that the highest level of godly revelation in the world was in the Beis Hamikdash. And in the Beis Hamikdash, there were two stages. There was the Mishkan which was built in the desert, and the Beis Hamikdash was built in Yerushalayim. So Beis Hamikdash had a higher level of kedusha than the Mishkan in the desert. The Mishkan was built of wood, and the Beis Hamikdash was built of rock, stone. Because this is where the aim of Beis Hamikdash is to show the permanence and the real presence, the godly presence, and that can be shown by building it from rock, from stone. Just to illustrate the point how it reflects itself in terms of Torah mitzvahs. Okay, this is what he says. The Einoi Doima. Okay, we have the place. The Einoi Doima. Before I go on, do I have you with me? Do we understand? Do we follow? Understand? The Einoi Doima. It's not similar. Nitzutz the Toyu. The Nitzutz, the godly spark that came from Toyu, Shebenisoyoin, that is found in a Nisoyoin, Lenitzutz, compared to the spark, Shebedover Gashmi, that is in a physical item. What does he say in these few words? He's saying both the Nisoyoin and Dover Gashmi are both places where the godly spark of Tohu has fallen down very low, and thus the spark is concealed and it has to be revealed through our effort. But the concealment of that spark, the way it is in Nisoyen, is completely different than the way it is in a Dover Gashmi, in a plain Gashmi's physical item. And because it's a different level of concealment, that means that it's a different power, a different type of nitzah, different type of spark. And I want to elaborate, to illustrate this. I explained that based on what we discussed before. If we talk about an apple, as we said before, an apple is also a spark from Toyu, because the tree doesn't produce it for any particular purpose. It's just doing its own thing, just for no purpose at all. It grows apples one year, the apples fall down, they rot, and it grows apples the next year. There is nothing, no intent of anything, of any particular purpose. That's Toyu.
What about the reproduction of more apple trees? There's a purpose of the apples falling off. This
But
seeds
and
germinate,
and
plant
and
grows.
and
There's an ultimate purge beyond that.
and what happens with trees?
More
It's
trees, more apples.
more trees, more apples, right? It's not nothing to it. Of course, we're talking about this. I don't want to go. I just want to illustrate the point here. The different nitzutzos. So the nitzutz in an apple is very deeply concealed, the godliness. And the nitzutz in a rock, in a stone, is also deeply concealed. But there's a big difference. It's a big difference. An apple, after all, does have a quality. It has a life to it, and it has a taste. It has a cycle. It has some message, so to speak. It says there is beauty in the world. There's something going on. Whereas a rock says absolutely nothing. All the rock says is, I exist. Nothing else.
A rock can have beauty.
A rock that has beauty is already not the lowest level. So, thus the nitzutz, the godly spark in an apple isn't as deeply concealed as it is concealed in an inanimate object, where you see nothing but mitzvahs. Like the Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe in Tanya expresses this inyan by saying that this physical world, especially the physicality, the actual inanimate part of the world, is such that truly represents a godly power. Why? Because it says, by its presence, it says, I exist because I exist. Nothing has to make me. An apple, after all, has a cycle. And it needs sustenance, it needs water, it needs light. And it has a cycle, a yearly cycle, a seasonal cycle. A rock doesn't change. This is like what's expressed in Tanya Mitzuyuse Me'atzmusei, that his existence is of itself. He denies, by virtue of its existence, the whole concept that it needs a creator. I'm just here. Where do we see that I'm being created? I have no purpose whatsoever. And there's no ila v'siva, there's no cause and reason why I'm here. That's what a rock represents. So here we understand that there is a difference in the nitzutz kedusha, the nitzutz that's concealed. The deeper it is concealed, the higher the nitzutz is, as we're going to see. So that's what the Rebbe says, that in an isoyen, and this is the difference between isoyen and stam and a dover gashmi. Every dover gashmi has a nitzutz soliki. And an isoyen, when a person is confronted with an obstacle in the world, obstacle to Torah mitzvahs, that prevents him from doing the mitzvahs, that's an isoyen. There also lies a nitzutz soliki. And there's a profound difference between the two. The difference is that a dover gashmi conceals the godliness in it, but it doesn't oppose godliness. You can make a bracha over the apple or not make a bracha, but the apple doesn't say you cannot eat me unless you eat it without a bracha. It doesn't oppose. It's not counter. You have to use your seichel. The apple does not demand that you make a bracha. That's what it should be. It should be demanding. You can't eat me unless you make a bracha. But that's the reality. Unless you recognize that I'm a creation from Hashem. So that much it's concealed. It's silent, but it doesn't oppose. Whereas in Nisoyen, the possibility in God's world that there should be something that opposes godliness is a tremendous concealment. How can it be? So therein lies a nitzutz of enormous, profound, of enormous power, and it's concealed that deep. That it can come out and say, not only, God forbid, I don't believe in God, I'm opposing it. I'm not going to let you do the mitzvahs. That seems to be completely impossible from a perspective, this is God's world after all. And if not for God's creating the world, there's no world. So how can such a possibility exist? That's where the nitzutz, there's a godly nitzutz spark that enlivens, that gives life and power to that opposition. And it's a tremendous power. And the Yid has to break through it and draw the Kedusha that's in it. That's what we're going to say, that's the Dina from Yisrael. So the nitzutz that's contained in a Nisoyin is not comparable to the nitzutz in a Dover Gashmi. Ukmoi, as for example, Michael Gashmi. Michael Hagashmi, physical food. Shehanitzutz hu b'haMichael hamizbaret. The nitzutz, that the nitzutz, the godly nitzutz that's contained in this Michael, is in the Michael hamizbaret, in this food that is being mizbaret, that is being used and purified. Vehabirur hu, and this birur, how do you accomplish it? Alidei ha'yisaskus b'hagashmi. It is by engaging, by being involved in the Gashmi. It is not that you throw it out. You say, oh, you don't recognize godliness, I throw you out. No. You go for it. And you get involved with it, you engage the Gashmi. How do you engage it? When he eats it according to the directives of the Torah, which means he eats it, first of all, it's kosher, and he makes a proper bracha. Ubekavono l'shem shomayim, and he eats it with a kavono, with the intent, l'shem shomayim. He eats it because he is serving Hashem, and he needs the koyach, he needs to serve Hashem. And then afterwards, with the strengthening of the koyach hanitois of loy, that was added to him, that was added to him by eating it, then he goes and actually uses the koyach to learn and daven. Hine, so then, as a result, mizdache hamaychol. The Michael, the food, is actually purified and elevated back into godliness. Which means that then it is realized. Realized means achieved. You come to the goal that the Michael achieved and realized its goal and its purpose. The Hainu, which means Hainu shenishlam hatachlis v'hakavon, that the tachlis and the end purpose and intent was completed. Bishvil ma broi hakodesh baruch. The reason why, for what reason, for what purpose did Hashem create us? So that now this Michael, this food, no longer claims just to be an existence in the world. It says, no, I'm here for a purpose. Recognizing a purpose, it means recognizing a creator. And that is truly a revelation, a God revelation, and the Michael really is achieving its end. And therefore, and therefore the godly spark of Tohu, is in it, is misbarer, is cleared out, and it becomes incorporated and united with Elokus. This is true regarding all physical objects with which a person engages. In all aspects, in all things that a person engages in Gashmius, there is this process of birurim, of showing their purpose, of revealing their purpose, revealing their contribution in the world, and thereby showing that they are here in the world for a godly purpose, thereby revealing a godly presence, and thereby showing that the reason these things exist is not because they exist, but because they were created by a creator. In all aspects of Gashmis, it's like this. Whether it is in aspects of tzroche b'nei yodam, of human needs makes no difference whether it is food, clothing, or lodging, in all aspects. When God created the world, on the sixth day, He created Adam Arishem, and He said to him that this whole world which I created is for you. I created it for you. That's what He said to him at the moment when he was created. And what are you to do with it? You are to multiply and to fill the whole world, and you are to subdue the world and humanize, render the world into a world where you could see a human quality, a purpose, not just a toil, not just a wilderness. That's what the human being is supposed to accomplish. And this is what we accomplish by, in fact, using all the things in the world, al pi Torah. So that when we eat, we think that we are just satisfying our belly, we're satisfying our hunger, where in fact, if we eat al pi Torah, we are actually accomplishing a tremendous purification of the world and fulfilling the purpose of that thing for which it was created. This is why in our world, the world that Hashem created for the sake of the human being, nothing counts, nothing has any value relative to the human being. This is even recognized by Goyim. Al pi Torah, it's clear like that, but even Goyim have come to recognize this. If, God forbid, there's an accident, there's some kind of a collapse, a building collapse, there is no limit of the effort that's going to be invested to get to the bottom and to see maybe there is still a human being who may be barely alive. There's no limit to it, because everyone recognizes, at least in a normal society, in a healthy society, that the human being, this is the center of the world. Nothing else counts. Yes?
What's the whole point of our ability to do zero? thinking, because if you think about how many Yidden there are and how many Yidden eat L'Shem Shamayim, it's not a lot of food that's going to get elevated, if you know what I mean.
Look, we can discuss it maybe next time, but I just want to show you. With all that you point out, there's such a small minority of Eden. And throughout the years, not only there was a minority of Eden, but the Goyim didn't let Eden do the Torah mitzvahs. And this repeated itself throughout the ages, and certainly in the last 2,000 years. And yet, look what happened to the world. With all the evil that's going on, it's not comparison. They were just reading, were you here when they were reading about, when they were reading Hebrew after Mincha? The whole world changed around. With all that, the world did get purified.
So it's the big picture that we're looking at here.
The big picture is affected. The big picture, the huge picture is affected by everyone's effort. Everyone's effort. And just to give you an illustration, you should be able to kind of relate to it visually. If this room were completely dark, a huge room, relatively speaking, you put up one little candle over here, what happens? What happens in that corner?
You're not so good, they can see you now.
Well, it affects the whole room. Right? Okay. To be continued in Mitzvah Shem.